Big Lez's League, an all rugby league experience.
Hey legends, Big Les here from the Big Lez's Rugby League podcast. Just want to come on here and do a quick little disclaimer. Any signings that have happened over the past 2 weeks, we will not be aware about on the podcast. We did record this one 2 weeks back, and I've scheduled it to come out over the next few weeks. So any signings that have happened in the past 2 to 3 weeks, we will not be aware of those signings on the podcast. Without further ado, though, let's get straight into it. Part 3 of the season reviews.
The
Can't
preview,
wait.
Dragons, the 2024 season for them. In a little bit of a snapshot, they finished 11th. Wins 11, losses 13. Points scored 508, points against 634. Attacking stats, they had 21.2 points per game. That was 12th most. Line breaks, 4.6 per game, which is 12th. Tackle bust, 35 per game, which is 7th. Meters, 1,378, which is 14th. Offloads, 10 per game, which is the 3rd most. Errors, 10.9, which is the 2nd most, which is a little bit concerning there. 78% on average completion rate, which is 14th. Defensively, points conceded 26.4 per game, which is the 5th most. Missed tackles 31.7, which is the 15th most. So that's pretty good there. That the defense is a little bit on check. Penalties conceded 4.9 per game, which is 15th. Sin bins 3, which is 2nd last. No send-offs there. Look, to be honest, what stands out to me, mate, is the errors, I think, as well, being 2nd highest for errors. But just, looking at the stats aside, probably a really successful year for the Dragons from where we expected them to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had them nowhere near where they've landed. I think a lot of people had them potentially, contenders for the wooden spoon and doing a lot worse. So I think it is a relatively successful year for them. Obviously they've had Flanagan come in as the coach. They've had a lot of talk in the media about different players and who's going where, and all the stuff always going on with Ben Hunt and everything that's happened with Zach Lomax. It's been an up and down interesting season for them. They've probably been the hardest team for me to tip the entire season, just because they literally went win-loss for the majority of the season. I think overall it's relatively successul. They just missed, they scraped out of that 8th position, which they probably should have been in. They should have made the top 8 realistically. But I think overall, I think you're right. It's been a relatively positive season for them.
Look, obviously, in regards to how their season tracked on, it was pretty, similar throughout the entire year. Obviously had a few wins in the first 10 rounds, having, I think it says here, 5 wins in 10 games, so around 50%. They pretty much kept a very similar strike rate, having a little bit of a fall off in those last 3 games, losing against the Sharks, Eels, and Raiders. A little bit of a season snapshot for you there. Look, really interesting, quite a positive season, I guess. You look at some of the gains they get next year and Damien Cook and Val Holmes as well. That is going to be huge for them going into next year. But in regards to a little more of a review, Lomax, when all the noise was around him leaving the club at the start of the year, going off to the Eels, there was all that noise about Lomax. For him to play as well as he did throughout the entire season, make his debut for Origin, to make his debut for Australia, I think he is huge. It's a massive season for Zach Lomax.
Oh, it is huge. He just shot through the stars, really. The way that he managed to put things together was unreal. And he played such a pivotal role, for New South Wales. Like, he deserved that jersey so well and just turned up massive. So, yeah, he was huge. Him linking up with Ben Hunt was, exceptional for them.
Yeah, look, it's sad to see that combination build up so well and then for him to leave at the back end of the year. And look, I think more positives. Lomax, I think we know that he's probably best suited to the wing aerially so well. Suited, obviously great off the kick, can also do some pretty crazy things as well with the football, passing game, offloading, kicking as well. Got a bit of a kicking game on him. He's going to be great over at the Eels, but a huge loss for me for St. George. They do get Val Holmes, but you're obviously getting a Val Holmes who probably didn't have the best 2024. He had a pretty decent year and obviously was in and around the discussion for the best center of the year. But, towards that mid to end point of the year, obviously there was a few errors in his game. Didn't have the best Origin series either. It was a very strange year for Val Holmes. So you are getting a Val Holmes who's got a few errors creeping into his game. He's getting into that latter part of his career. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens with Val Holmes. But I also know that Val Holmes is going to be one of those type of players that can turn that around quick smart.
Yeah, definitely can. My only concern with Val Holmes coming into this team is, like I said, he's kind of on that latter part of his season. It's not season, career at this point. But he broke his leg, didn't he? Just right at the end of this season. So doesn't seem to be anything too crazy when it comes to leg breaks. But at the same time, as he's getting a little bit older, the rehab's probably not as easy. So, what percentage is he coming back would be my question for them. So I'm sure it's probably not that big of a deal, but it does put that kind of question mark over him. One thing that he definitely didn't, fail to do throughout the season, though, his kicking was still immaculate. He has that thing on a string. It's like a straight arrow. It's ridiculous. I think he kicked something like, 20, might have been 23, 24, maybe even more goals in a row. So, yeah, that's a pretty handy thing to have coming into the team when you've got someone like Lomax on the way out.
I'll tell you what, it's definitely better than my Wombats record just quietly of 0-1. He can definitely hit them well and smoothly. Yeah, so good, Val Holmes, with his goal kicking, and it's going to be a huge positive. Losing a guy like Lomax who can kick very well as well, to get probably one of the better goal kickers in the game at the moment into your team, is going to be massive. Talk to me about Damien Cook, the impact that he's going to have, and where do you see him? Do you see him at 9? Do you see him at 14?
Oh, that's a tricky one because old mate, what's his name? Jacob Little. What a season he had. So it will be interesting. I think the wealth of experience, a guy that has done it at every single level, and Cookie coming in, that is just massive to a team like this that are moving in a positive direction. So I think you could put him in either or, really. If I had my pick, I'd be putting him in at number 9. I think that's where he deserves to go, but he could easily be sitting there at 14, I think, as well. But yeah, no, I think it's a massive positive having him coming inside.
I think his versatility has been a bit of a curse for him because he played a bit of roaming lock towards the back end of the year for South Sydney. So maybe Shane looks at that and goes, he has a lot of value there as a 14. Maybe you just chuck him into 14. And again, Little and his form, he heard Cook was signing and goes, fuck, I need to just go to another level. And he did. So it is going to be very, very interesting to see what happens with that 9 rotation and that 1-2 punch. I think it's very unfair on Little if he goes to 14, but it is what it is. Obviously, you got Damien Cook coming in with experience, rep experience. Fuck, it's going to be a real headache. And I think it's a lot more of an underrated headache, than, it's not as highly rated as what people, as what it actually is. So, yeah, super, super interesting to see what happens there.
For sure. I think it's really positive, though, teams having that option of that 1-2 punch with their hookers. We've seen it work for so many years, I guess, while you had Harry Grant and Cheese up at Melbourne, down in Melbourne, sorry. So I think either way they decide to play them, it's not really going to be the worst thing in the world. I'm sure that Little can pick up a thing or two from Cookie as well. But I guess the main worry would be if you're in the centres there at the Diamonds, that would be the real scare. If you got Cookie coming to that team, your spot could be gone any day. So that's what you got to look. That's what you got to watch out for. But no, it's not the worst problem to have.
Mate, Origin grade center. I'd definitely be,
exactly.
Shaking in my boots if I saw Damien Cook coming in. That's for sure. Speaking of the centers too, it actually is a little bit of a talking point. Because obviously Val Holmes probably takes one of those spots, but I think the other spot's really up for grabs. You've obviously got Matthew Fine, who's in this side as well. Moses Sully will probably be the front runner. But there's plenty of young guys. Corey Allen, people forget, are in this team too. He's coming back from injury. It is going to be really interesting to see how this back line is made up. Even the wing spots as well. Ravalawa, it seems that he's a little bit out of favour at the Dragons at the moment. You obviously got, as I said, Corey Allen, Christian Tuipulotu, probably my shining light, especially with the back end of the year that he had. You got so many guys that can play in the back line in this team as well. It'll be super interesting to see what happens with this back line. Obviously, a little bit of pressure has been alleviated with Savelio Tamale going to the Raiders and Matthew Fine going over to the Dolphins, but it's definitely a bit of a worry. And obviously, Jack Bird leaving as well. It'll be really interesting to see how this back line looks going into next year.
Yeah, it will be interesting. I think that goes for a lot of the slots in this team. They've kind of trimmed the old fat, I feel like, in a way, which will, create a lot of opportunities for players to step into different roles and really prove themselves. So, yeah, it will be interesting to see how it all works out. I think you're right. I think Val Holmes is pretty much going to lock up one of those centre positions. And then I feel those other positions really is going to come down to the preseason, whatever Flano's cooking up for them during that period of time. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Mate, we got to talk about it. There's a lot of word that Ben Hunt is going to be somewhere else next season. First of all, what I'll ask is, where do you think Ben Hunt's going to land? And the second thing I'm going to ask is, if Ben Hunt does leave, who's your halfback for the Dragons?
Well, that's interesting because I guess the talk of that is potentially Gutho, isn't it? Like him coming over,
Mm.
I think has been whispered on there. So I guess it's going to be hard to see. I think old Kyle, he might be in the halves there somewhere. But where Ben Hunt's going to be going, well, I think it's been pretty much said that he, is very much keen on a return to Queensland. So that lands with a couple clubs there. Supposedly Dolphins and Cowboys aren't interested. Titans could very much be a front runner because Kieran Foran probably only has that one more season or so left in him. Because this, I think it might be his last season, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think Ben Hunt's got a property there. I think Byron Bayish way or northern New South Wales, so that would suit him quite nicely around the Gold Coast area. But in my wildest fantasies, he'd be coming home. Is what I'd like to say. Is what I would like. And weirdly enough, we don't know enough information about it to really get into it. But I guess with the massive question mark over Ezra Mann at the moment, well, who knows? Depending on what happens there. But no, I don't really think he's probably going to end up at the Broncos. I think that's going to be a little bit wild. One rogue one that kind of comes to mind for me that I haven't really seen in discussion, might not happen at all, is could we see a Ben Hunt at a Rabbitohs side?
It's tough. There's definitely a bit of cap space left at the Rabbitohs after obviously Cookie going, Burgess going. Yes, you could. I'd love to see it. I think it'd be great. And I think that's a pretty obvious thing for me to love seeing that. Obviously, for me at least, it'd be interesting where he'd play at South too, because obviously you had Damien Cook leave. So does he go into 9 if he goes to South Sydney? Does he go into 7? Look, for me, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we're talking to him at the moment. I think the only 2 clubs actually talking to him at the moment, and there's been a lot of news about a lot of teams pulling out. It sounds like the only 2 clubs in the race is the Broncos and the Bulldogs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It sounds like the Gold Coast pulled out of the race over the weekend, which is huge. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where Ben Hunt turns up. But yeah, South Sydney would be wild. I think he's more likely to land at the Roosters than South, to be honest, and that hurts me as a South fan. But I think that's probably more the side he probably wants to walk into.
Yeah, I can imagine, and Lord knows they've got all the money in the world at the moment to throw at basically whoever they want. But no, and funny enough, I guess he would have been here the other day, Ben Hunt, in Brisbane for the game against Tonga, the Australian Tonga match. So he might have had a little visit to Red Hill. We never know. I guess we'll find out very shortly. Doggies as well. They could definitely do with a world class half. I think that is, in a way, what they might have been missing a little bit at the 7. But at the same time, Sexton for them, he really was a gem for them towards the majority of the season that he did get games. I think it'd be rough for them to give him the boot. I guess time will tell. It'll be interesting to see if Dragons even release him for the next season, if that's at all going to happen, or if he's going to be actually playing out that contract. But no, I'd love to see him come home anyway.
Sounds like they have told him that if he can find a deal, he is free to go. So it will be very interesting. I think that what is interesting as well with the Dragons is that they've got only 2 spots left in their top 30 at the moment. They've got a lot of young guys in this side. But in particular as well, it's something that not many people would be speaking about. Cody Ramsey comes back into conversations for this side as well. You look at the 2023 that he's had, obviously was one of the breakout stars of 2023 and 2022. He walks back into this side, obviously after a huge stint on the sideline with illness. Is he in your 17?
I wouldn't say straight away. I don't think he'd be walking straight back into that team. Again, I think it really depends on what they see preseason wise, but I think he'd need to get a couple more games under his belt, maybe in the resis before he really moves in. But yeah, if he plays anything like he did during that 22-23 season, like you're saying, yeah, it could be definitely a possibility for him to come back in, but I think it might take him a little bit of time.
All right. Where do you see the Dragons finishing in 2025?
Alrighty, so the Dragons, I'm going to go again with about 10th to 12th. They had massive improvement, but I think if they are going to be losing, a player like Ben Hunt, I think they've got a bit to work out. So I think that's where they're going to be falling.
You see, this is the thing. If they keep Ben Hunt, I think they could finish 8th to 12th. But I think if they lose Ben Hunt, I almost think they're in contention for the spoon. I think it's that big of a gap. I think what Ben Hunt does for that side, how important he is to this team, the combination he's building with some of those spine players as well. You look at how well Kyle Flanagan played at 6 with Ben Hunt obviously steering the ship. Obviously Tyrell Sloan too, who's built a nice combination with. I think that he's so important to that side where if he goes out and goes elsewhere next year, I really do think that the Dragons are probably my spoon favourite again. And look, it's so big to say with a Shane Flanagan coach side, but I think that Ben Hunt's just going to be destroying the camel's back, where if he goes, they're screwed. But look, we'll have to wait and see. If Ben Hunt stays, for me, 8 to 12 is probably that bracket. I think that they can sort of push to make the 8 like they were this season. Let's kick on to the Fins. Fins up. The Dolphins, they finished 10th. It's crazy how close they were to getting into the 8, mate. Talk to me about the Dolphins.
Oh, what a season that they had. I think they, again, outperformed a lot of people's expectations. Second year in the NRL, and to just narrowly miss out on the 8 is, it's insane. I don't think they would have potentially even had the expectations of making the 8 that early on. Just missed out. But yeah, that's the magic that Wayne Bennett can do to these teams, pulling together, a team of, a lot of players that weren't wanted anywhere else to achieve what they did. Yeah, pretty amazing stuff.
It's huge, mate. It's huge. They've done so well. I think they probably have one of the more stacked squads in the competition as well. The amount of depth that they had, but experienced depth. That Edric Lee there in the back line waiting to come in. Branko Lee was there at that one point, but I think he retired towards the midpoint or even the start of this season. Anthony Milford there in the halves would be so good for some of those young blokes, particularly Isaiah Katoa too. Yeah, look, the wealth of experience they had there, and the depth that they had too, and then they still have going into next year, is huge. And the signings they have for next year, which we'll talk about in a second, I think it's just going to make that side even more stacked than it already is. But let's talk about the season that they had, 2024. 11 wins, 13 losses, 577 points scored, 578 points conceded. Let's go into the attacking stats. They scored 24 points per game, which was 7th. Line breaks, 4.9 on average per game, which was 9th in the competition. Tackle bust, 30.9 per game, which was 15th. So not too many tackle busts there compared to other teams. Meters, 1,413, which was 12th. Offloads, 9.2 offloads per game, which is 7th. Errors, 9.5 per game, which is the 3rd least, which is nice. Completion rate, 79%, 10th, so that mid sort of mark. Defense and discipline, points conceded, 24.1, which is 8th. Missed tackles, 34.8. Missed tackles per game, which is 8th as well. Penalties conceded 5.7 per game, which is 6th. Sin bins, 7 sin bins, which is 7th. No send-offs. Talk to me about what stat stands out to you the most.
I don't know if there really is anyone that leaps out at me. I think a lot of those just point towards them having a relatively solid season across the across the park. Sorry, I think that's pretty much what speaks to me out of all this, where they haven't really had this, absolutely ridiculously amazing or particularly bad season. I think it just has been that, it's been all right. I can't really pick out anything out of these ones.
Yeah, look, I think it's, as you said, it's a pretty mid solid season. But I'll tell you what, for them to be pushing for the 8 like they were at the back end of the year, I think is such a huge sign for them. Yes, their back end of the year record, obviously from round 20 to round 27, they only had 2 wins in that period. So it probably hurt them at the back end of the year when they were struggling to get wins on the board. Granted, they had a Titans side that was pushing for the 8 also. They went up against the Panthers, the Roosters, the Bulldogs, and the Storm, all in that time as well, and then finished off with the Knights. So definitely a little bit of a tough draw at the back end of the year, but it definitely hurt them in regards to pushing for the 8. I tell you what, though, for them to even be pushing for the 8 is outstanding.
Oh, for sure. And like you said, it kind of come down to a bit of a rough run towards the end, and things just didn't quite fall their way. But just to get anywhere near it is, it is massive stuff. And my only concern, I guess, with them moving forward into the next season would be the loss of Wayne Bennett, because we've seen what happens with clubs like that when he kind of pulls the rug and walks out of there. So, well, I'm sure we'll speak about that a little bit later on. But yeah, overall, it is huge for them. And I think they've had a lot of players emerge throughout this season, whether it's been injuries, whatever else has happened. We've seen some real guns coming through, and that depth that you spoke about earlier just helped them so much keep that kind of consistency, even if it was kind of that average across the board. It kept them moving forward, which was amazing, and that experience that they have, I'm sure, would have pushed them all the way.
Yeah, totally, mate. Well, they obviously lose. They lose Jesse Bromwich. He's retired. They lose Tavita Pangai Jr., who goes to the Catalans Dragons in what will be a stacked Catalans Dragons side going into next year. And then Ewan Aiken as well, who goes to South Sydney. Out of those losses, mate, who stands out to you the most?
Out of those ones, you got to go with Bromwich, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I think so as well. He's a huge loss in regards to that experience through the middle. In saying that, they get Daniel Saifidi into this pack, plus Tom Gilbert comes back. They get Tom Flegler back, hopefully as well. They have got some great players coming in regards to forwards. Kula Kefu Finefuyaki also joins this team, which is huge, coming over from the Cowboys. I really like some of these forward signings, and I think they're going to be a force through the middle next year.
Yeah, no, they're going to be big through there. I'm really holding out to see what's happening with big Tommy Flegler. I don't know if you've seen too much of the injury that he's got. It's a very strange kind of odd injury for him to have, the sort of nerve damage. So I think it's all up in the air. But if we've got a player like him coming into that team, it's going to be massive. And like you said, those other signings coming in, the experience as well, with the Saifidi coming into your team, Finifuaki he's had an outstanding season. So yeah, they're definitely going to be boosting that team even more.
Yeah, totally, mate. Well, look, I'm just trying to be happy Harry at the moment and trying to be a little bit positive. Hopefully he does come back into this side, big Tommy Flegler. That's what everyone would want. Obviously a tough injury there with the shoulder. Contemplating retirement too, halfway through this year, I should say. Obviously a bit of nerve damage in there, which is just, a real pain in the ass. I think 2 or 3 surgeries now, which is just hectic. Wishing him all the best coming into this upcoming season too. And hopefully we do get to see him back. But assuming that he's back in this forward pack, it is going to be huge. I think what's pretty underrated going into this upcoming season too is what happens with Tom Flegler, because Max Plath has just come out and had an absolute blinder of a back end of the year. I don't think that Tom Flegler Sorry, Tom Gilbert. I don't think he takes that 13 jersey. I really don't. I think that he probably moves into the pack. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think you can flip the coin on that one. Max Platt has been outstanding this season. He has been, and we're going to speak about the shining light for the Dolphins. That he was going to be my pick for sure. So, yeah, it will be interesting, especially that's a couple injuries now. So coming back into the squad and getting 13 straight away, it might be a bit of a tall task. I think it depends maybe where he's at as well. But yeah, it's going to be hard to take it off a player or somebody like Max Platt, the way that he's been going, he's just been great.
Well, there's been a lot of chat about him playing Origin next year too, Maxi Plath. Obviously heavily talked about too. I know that Big Garino is quite high on him playing Origin. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, he's been locked in there long term with the Dolphins too, which is nice. I honestly think, in their best 17, he is probably their 13. I think that Flegler and Gilbert will probably be in the pack. I think that Saifidi obviously will start too. It'll be really interesting to see the makeup of this side and how it's shaped up, but they've got a really nice, relatively young, strong pack, which is going to do some damage next season. We're not here to talk about next season. We're here to talk about this season. Mate, talk to me about Trey Fuller. How big of an impact has this bloke had on this team?
They got to fit him in somewhere. He's a freak. So when Hammer was out and finally getting his opportunity, God, did he grab that with two hands. He was just doing freaky stuff out there. Frustrating if you're coming up against him. Like, he was just pulling some stuff out that you would not believe. But yeah, he was great. It was nice to see them actually fit both him and Hammer on the same team, in a couple games there. But yeah, what an outstanding player. He's somebody that needs to be in first grade side week after week.
Mate, totally. I think what a lot of people don't realize as well with Trey Fuller, a lot of not avid rugby league, viewers probably think, oh, it's the new young kid coming through. He's 27 years old, Trey Fuller. He's a veteran, or at least going into the peak of his career. What hurts the Dolphins next year? Now, let me just put this forward to you. If Trey Fuller is fully fit, he's probably the starting fullback. I probably push Hammer into the centers. Do you sort of agree? Do you sort of put him in a 14 jersey? Where would you have Trey Fuller before I get to the next point?
I have no problem with that, I think. I think you could put him at fullback and give Hammer a roaming license and, yeah, have fun coming up against them.
Well, that's going to be going down the drain because Trey Fuller did his ACL in the finals campaign for Q Cup for the Dolphins. So he's going to be out for the full year next year, which is going to hurt them so much. As I said, if he's fully fit, he's in my starting 13 for next year. The fact that they're not going to have him around, not only to play that fullback role, but with Hammer in there, if Hammer gets injured, or obviously when he goes to play Origin, there's not too many guys to pick from in regards to fullback depth. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens there. The next best fullback you've got in the squad is Jake Averillo.
Yeah, he's somebody that could definitely go in there, and I guess they've had Cody Nicarima in there as well, haven't they? So yeah, there is a few options, I guess, but yeah, you can't really look past Trey Fuller. That is just top tier stuff.
Yeah, huge. It's a huge loss going into next year. As I said, we're not talking about next year on this podcast, but look, mate, Isaiah Katoa, what a weird end to the year for him. Obviously, being in the side for majority of the year, and then the back end is in and out of first grade. It's quite strange. This is 2 years now. This has happened in a row. Is he in your starting 17 next year? Or is he your halfback for the Dolphins moving forward?
I think so. He's got to be the permanent one. He's just so young. He's not going to wake up one day and just be like your DC with all the experience and everything. It's going to be something that's going to take time. And whether that is, coming in and out of the first grade team, I guess we've seen that this season. I'm sure we'll get to it, but with your Sam Walkers and guys like that as well, just to kind of push along that development. Bit of tough love in a way. But I think he's the man moving forward. And, there's a lot of great players that have come out and given him massive raps. So yeah, there's definitely something there for him.
I think it's going to be a big Pacific Championships for him as well, just to really stamp his authority. It's great to see that Christian Wolf, has given him the keys there with the Tongan side. I think that's a big sign as to Christian Wolf backing him and just seeing where he's sort of at going into the preseason as well, which is nice. Mate, I tell you what, there's so many shining lights in this side. But one of them for me is Jack Bostock, obviously the rookie of the year this year. Talk to me about Bostock.
Oh, he's just a weapon, isn't he? He's been great. Try scoring machine, big, strong, fast. Yeah, he's going to be great. He's going to be one to watch moving forward into the future. His cooking as well seems to be top tier, so that's always fun. But yeah, Jackie Bostock, he's been great.
Yeah, mate, I tell you what, I wish I could cook like a Jackie Bostock. I tell you that for free. Those cooking challenges, he has got some skills there, that's for sure. But he also cooks on the field, which is nice. He does some great things. It has been, documented that his centre pairing has changed. Obviously, he's had both Herbie Farnworth and Avarillo on that left side with him. It was a huge call throughout the year to move Farnworth over to that right side in that one game where they ended up winning by a fuckload. But yeah, look, I mean, what are your sort of premonitions? Are you having Herbie on the left or right? Now going into next season with pairing up with either Asako or Bostock.
Yeah, I'd be keeping. I reckon just keep Herbie there on the right hand side. I think is a good spot for him. Yeah, I reckon moving forward, that's the go.
Yeah, look, I'd be happy with either or because he seems to do well on both sides of the field. He's been huge for them. We talked about how big of a loss he was for the Broncos, but how big of a pickup has he been for the Dolphins?
Oh, he's ridiculous. He is as strong as an ox. The carries that he has, he's just breaking tackles left, right, and center. Defensively as well is just amazing. But yeah, moving forward, like you don't really get too much better than that. I put him in my top 5 centers in the whole league at this point. He's just such a good pickup for him, and heartbreaking loss for the Broncos.
Pretty heartbreaking loss for the Broncos, mate. You cannot understate that. But a huge pickup for the Dolphins this year. With this Dolphins side, obviously gaining a few players and sort of starting to shed back that experience a little bit and just really go with that young squad. Where do you see them lining up in 2025? Where do you think they go on the ladder?
This one's a little bit of a tricky one. Again, historically we've seen teams fully fall off. Well, maybe not fully fall off, but had some issues after Wayne leaving. But I do have some confidence in Wolf with that side. Like you said, they've got those young players there. They've got all the ingredients to make something good. I think they're going to land roughly around where they have this season. So I'm going to go probably about 12th, 14th for the Dolphins in the 2025 season.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm probably a little bit similar. I think I've got a little bit higher hopes for them. I think that with the side that they've got, the forward pack they're most likely going to have, if obviously Flegler comes back into this team as well, and obviously, depending on how Gilbert is, mate, I'm going to go with 7 to 11. That's where I'm going to sort of sit them. I think they can definitely make the 8 if they have a strong enough season, if these rookies really seem to come on as well. They've got the depth to, push through, even if they do have a few injuries in this team. What's going to be interesting as well, and again, something that's fallen a little bit under the radar is Valence Tawade is currently a free agent. Be interesting to see if Christian Walsh picks him back up and re-signs him or if he goes elsewhere. But a guy that has sort of fallen into the open market, Valence Tawade, what's your read on that? Do you think the Dolphins should pick him back up?
He was a problem in the Q Cup season, wasn't he? He was running over people left, right, and center. It makes you wonder if it was some elaborate mind game to drop him down to push him to that next level, because it looks like he's really picked his fitness up. He had a great season in Q Cup. So I could definitely see it, whether it's the Dolphins or another team out there looking to pick up a Valence Tavaro. And I think it could be hard to slot him into that Dolphins side, though.
Mate, there was a lot of talk about the Panthers picking him up a little bit earlier in the season when there was talks of the Dolphins letting him go due to those fitness reasons, stuff like that. The Panthers was a team that was heavily publicized. should the Panthers just go after him again and just try and get him into that team?
Oh, you never know, and I'd hate to see what an Ivan Cleary could do to a player like him. You look at your Paul Alamodis of the world that have come into that side and what they've been able to do. So yeah, it could very well be a possibility. I think there is, like I said, room for him somewhere. I'm just not 100% sure where that is. I like that, but I guess we'll find out, especially if he does go to market.
Yeah, 100%. We'll have to wait and see. Let's move on to the Raiders. Obviously, a pretty strong season from the Raiders. They just missed out on the 8. Obviously, finished 9th there with 12 wins, 12 losses. That record last year would probably get you into the 8 too. So it just shows you how much the competition has evened out. Points scored 474, points conceded 601. What was your read on the Raiders?
Raiders, I think they had a bit of an up and down season again. It was hard to get a read on them. They did have some massive injuries, but I think overall they had a pretty successful season. Like you said, just narrowly missing out on the 8. They're always up around there, aren't they? They're always competing for it. They're always a team that's in that battle. So I think overall it's nothing really to be disappointed about for them. Sucks that they missed the 8, but I think they went pretty well.
Yeah, I think they went well as well, particularly with a lot of the guys that they had lost, particularly Jack Whiten to push for the 8 still without a guy like Jackie Boy Whiten, I think is huge. And just a very young spine too. And not many questions really answered as well going into this season around the 9 jersey, around the 6 jersey. There's still a lot of questions there. Fullback for me probably isn't confirmed yet. Do you think that's a bit of a worry going into next year that we still don't have those answers?
I think old Sticky's going to be able to pull them together. Yeah, you're right. There is a lot that's up in the air at the moment, but I think they've got enough depth in their squad to be able to fill those positions and not really worry too much. I think they, again, like a lot of these teams, they have had some shining lights come through, a lot of young talent. That has directly come through either the Raiders or whether they've come from other clubs. So yeah, it will be interesting. There is a lot of shoes to fill with some big players leaving, which I'm sure we'll jump to. But yeah, no, I think they'll be okay filling those spots.
Yeah, we'll jump to that in a second, but let's go through the stats first. Attacking stats. In terms of points per game, they were 19.8, which is the second worst amount of points scored per game. Line breaks, 3.9 per game, so that's last for line breaks. Tackle bust, 33.1, which is 10th for tackle bust, sorry. Meters per game, 1,431, which is 10th. Offloads, 8.7 per game, which is 10th. Errors, 10.1 per game, which is 10th again. They really like the number 10, these Raiders. Completion rate, they were 80%, which is 5th. Points conceded, 25 per game, which is 7th. Missed tackles, 35.4 per game, which is the 6th most. Penalties conceded, 5 per game, which is 13th, which is pretty good there as well. Sin bins, 8 sin bins, which is the 4th most sin bins in the competition. What stands out to you the most?
I think the number 10 stands out, so that might be a little bit of an omen for next season where they might finish. But I think their completion rate is a big positive for the Raiders. They did very well there. Their sin bins on the negative side of things were a little bit high, but I think it's a holistic view of their season. That it wasn't this crazy outstanding one, that it was kind of that. Sort of season that I've had. So yeah, outside of the completion rate for me, there's nothing really.
Yeah, look, I think the completion rate is a huge positive as well. I really like that they've been able to keep that at a high. For me, I think that defensively, points conceded and missed tackles is a big thing. Obviously, 6th and 7th for both of those, so definitely something they need to improve on their defense. But look, to be honest, with the spine that they've had, chopping and changing, they've never really been an answer for them to be this successful with that, as we spoke about, I think it's a pretty positive sign that they were able to do that. Who was your shining light this year?
We have two that really come to my mind. One of those was actually kind of the resurgence of Xavier Savage this season. I think he's really coming to his own. There's talks of him potentially, or at least in the future, being up there for state of origin position for Queensland. He could very well be in talks. I think he's matured a lot as a player. He seems to put on a bit of size, but he's just he was elite. He really stood out for me. And then Ethan Strange as well. He was a pretty obvious choice there. A lot of hype with him coming in this season, and I think to an extent very much lived up to that. I think he played that almost Jackie White type of role. That's going to be something really hard to fill, but for such a young player, I think he did really well. And there's a big future moving forward. So those are probably two that really, really stood out for me. For their season.
Mate, Ethan Strange was unreal for the most part that he was in there. I really enjoyed watching his footy. Just a really tough competitor. Went into centre as well at the back end of the year and just played extremely well there as he's locked in long term. What do you think? Where does Ethan Strange fit in next year? Is he a 6 or is he left centre?
I think I'd like to see him there at 6. I think he's got the running game for it. He is a big boy too, but I think he's pretty in 6. I reckon that's the spot for him.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit iffy because it seemed like the biggest strength for Ethan Strange was his running game. Obviously, plenty of tackle busts per game. Was able to break a defensive line quite easily. Had great footwork. I didn't really see a lot of other points that would be, equivalent to what you'd need from a 6 stand out for me, I should say. In his game throughout the year, if that makes sense. There wasn't too many other, qualities of a 6 that stood out for me for Ethan Strange. Was very much so. His great games were very heavily lent on his running game and what he was able to do with that running game. So I think that he sort of needs to add some more layers to his game too if he wants to really take that 6 with 2 hands. So I think he probably starts the year at centre for me. I think that he sort of just works on his game a little bit, maybe even, and look, this is probably a big call too, but he might start in cup and play a bit of 6 in cup and just work on his game there as well and sort of just get those qualities of a 6 in. But we'll have to wait and see. Look, we never know. He could just start the year straight away at 6, and I wouldn't be too against that either. But I just feel like there's a few more things in his game. If he wants to be an out-and-out 6 and have those qualities of a 6, there's just a few more things he needs to add to his game and a few more layers he needs to add into his game in that regard. So I'm sort of leaning towards KO Weeks for the 6 jersey, but he could end up at 1 as well. I'm really torn for KO Weeks.
Yeah, he was another one that would be that I was going to mention, I guess, in the discussion of shining lights. He really went well at fullback, didn't he? With a couple of the injuries and the chops and changes. He was great back there. What a pickup for the Canberra Raiders. I think I personally prefer to see him there at fullback. I think that's going to be a spot for him moving forward. You've got a few other options, but I reckon if I had to pick one, that'd be the one.
Well, he was great in that Prime Minister's game, wasn't he, when he came on in that fullback role and just absolutely broke the game open in there. So, yeah, look, for me, I agree. I think that he probably sits around that fullback jersey more likely, but I think he's probably equally as favourite for the 6 jersey as well. I'm super torn on where he sits because he is just so good at both, and he could be so good at both as well. He's so versatile. He can just move around pretty much anywhere. I think he could play centre to a pinch if you really wanted him to, just with the amount of size that he's put on throughout the back end of the year as well. He slotted to dummy half for Manly as well at stages. So versatile. Very keen to see where he fits into this team. Both him and Ethan Strange are locked in for 2027 and 2028. So locked in long term, which is nice. Mate, I'll tell you what, Matt Timoko, what a season he's had. Huge year for Matt Timoko. The previous season was big. This season was probably bigger. And the bit that stands out to me the most for Matt Timoko in the late rounds, around round 20, I think it was around 20 and 21, he popped his shoulder out twice in both of those games and came back onto the field and played, and then did not complain about it for the rest of the year and just, kept battling on. I don't think he missed a game all season either.
He's just a weapon, isn't he? He has such an imposing physical presence out there. And then, like you mentioned, the toughness to match. Yeah, I would not like to be marking up against him. He would be scary coming at you, and he hits bloody hard as well. Yeah, he's just built on strength, and it's just getting better, it seems, every single season. So it's going to be really exciting to see what he can do. But yeah, he had an outstanding season.
Mate, are you thinking Xavier Savage could be a fullback contender for next year? Because they were sort of backfired on that plan a little bit and put him on the wing for the year. So do you think that he's probably in the conversation for fullback?
I think it'd be between him and your KO Weeks, I think for sure. I think he very much was. Would have been a couple seasons ago. He was very much touted as the next thing, picked up a few injuries. I guess maybe had some stuff going on with Ricky, I don't know, where he might not have been super happy with him, but he seems to have really come a long way, like I was saying, with maturity in his game. So maybe everything that he's gone through at the wing this season's just been kind of building him up to that role. So it is a possibility, and he is so dangerous. He's one of those guys that every time he gets the ball, especially in fullback, you're like, oh God, like what's he going to do? Because he can just bust the game apart with the athleticism and speed, and his ability, just raw talent is wild. So it could very well happen. But he's played outstanding on the wing as well. So they've got a few options moving forward, which is a great problem to have again. He is exciting at fullback.
The depth and versatility they have in this squad around their spine positions is so good to see. Mate, something before we move on to where this side is going to be placed, I think two things that have sort of caught a lot of people off guard with this Raiders team. The first one is the loss of James Schiller, who obviously goes to the Knights next year, which we'll talk about very, very soon. But also, Josh Papali'i is unsigned still for next year. He's got a mutual option for next year. So he doesn't have a contract set up in stone for next year, I believe, which is really, really strange that they haven't sorted that out sooner.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit odd for Big Papa not to have something in place. I guess in a way, there's some stuff happening in the background with him, I believe, that we're still waiting to find out. We're not going to jump really too deep into that, but as well as he's starting to just get a little bit older, where they're not too sure if that's the way that they'd like to commit. It'll be interesting to see if we hear anything with him.
Yeah, totally. I think it's just a weird one that he hasn't been locked in yet for at least another year. Or maybe he's just considering himself if he wants to go on and play that extra year. If they lose Papali'i, that's a huge loss going into next season for sure. And it definitely changes how this forward pack is shaped up going into next year as well.
If Big Papa wasn't a part of that team, it would be a very different look. But at the same time, I feel like they do have some bloody forwards in there that can't feel those shoes if for whatever reason he didn't re-sign or decide to step away from the game. He crossed 300 odd games during this season, so he would be starting to, I guess, potentially look at wrapping things up. But yeah, like I said, I think they got plenty of players there if needed.
Yeah, totally. They've definitely got the depth in the forward pack. I think that 3/4 of their top 30 squad is actually forwards, which is very interesting. That's going to be very interesting to see what they do there going into next year. Let me just fix up my camera and turn that back on. There we go. I had to switch up the camera there. Sorry for the viewers. My camera over there has just died, which is perfect timing. Where do you see the Raiders finishing up in 2025?
I've actually gone really hot on the Raiders for 2025. Like I said, they're always battling around that top 8, in the top 8. I think they've got the talent to be there next year, if everything kind of falls their way. So I've got them going 6 to 8 for 2025.
Yeah, look, I mean, they definitely have the potential to do that. They always seem to be that team that just, slides in there. And, I just don't know if they can do that again, though. I think that there's a lot of questions around their side at the moment in the spine. Big Papa, the big question mark around him too. I'm going to go for a big call, put it on the page the other day. I'm sure you would have seen it there as well. But I think that the Raiders are a contender for the wooden spoon. So I'm going to go 15th to 17th for me. I think that the Raiders could be in for a bit of a rough year. We've seen shades of it throughout, the past 2 years as well, them having little rough patches in seasons. I think that there still isn't enough questions answered for me. And I still feel like they, other than Tarpanay, and obviously a Fogarty to an extent as well, there's not really that star player in that squad too that can really turn things around. So for me, I think that the Raiders probably are one of the favourites, and they are the sports bet favourites for the spoon going into next year.
Oh, really? Already? Jeez. The big milk getting done dirty by sports bet.
I know.
Yeah.
Mate, it's tough to be a Raiders supporter right now.